we have been doing a sermon series on the questions that Jesus asked. Each week we have been examining a different question, and those questions were picked based upon what all of you were most interested in. So today we are going to be turning to the book of Matthew and looking at a really important question. So let's listen now to these words from Matthew chapter 16, verses 13 through 20. Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, but others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that the Son of Man is?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. This is the word of the Lord. Who do you say that I am? Questions of identity are at the center of the Gospels. Jesus asks this question in this morning's passage, but those of us gathered here already know the answer. And the fact that we know the answer may be our biggest problem and also our biggest challenge. Images of Jesus matter. They mattered when Jesus uttered these words, and they matter today. This morning's passage comes from the book of Matthew, and only in this gospel does the book begin with a detailed genealogy of Jesus and his ancestors. The gospel begins as an account of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Now we may gloss over that, but if we pay attention, we may be wondering, was it Joseph, Jesus' earthly father? Matthew here is tying Jesus into his forefathers. He is tying them into the history of the Jewish people. And this is really, really important, because for Matthew, identity is not just about who we are, but who has come before us and who accompanies us. Tying Jesus into Abraham links Jesus with the exile from Egypt and with deliverance to the promised land, with extraordinarily faithful women like Ruth, who we find here is one of Jesus' forebears. Only in this gospel do we read of Jesus' family's early escape to Egypt. Shortly after Jesus' birth, King Herod puts out a decree to kill all sons under 2 because he is threatened by Jesus. So here Jesus and his family escape to Egypt, stay there until it is safe, and then return to the promised land. This exile period in Egypt is a foreshadowing, but also reminds us of Moses. And so scholars often say that for Matthew, he portrays Jesus as the new Moses, a man who will come to deliver his people. Now, when we look at the genealogy, most of us skip over it. We don't want to read that part of the Bible, and we certainly don't want to be asked to read it aloud and have to struggle with all of those names. But the genealogy is important. For the early hearers of this gospel, they would look at that and they would recognize the name. They would associate stories and characteristics, and that would help them to know more about Jesus because of who has come before him. How many people here have worked on a family genealogy? Do we have any genealogists in our midst or anyone who has looked into their family history? A few. Well, one of the interesting things I think about doing that is when you discover a relative who has a hidden talent or love that you have. You may love to sing and your parents can't carry a tune, and you've always wondered, where does that love of music come from? Well, then you look into your genealogy, and you find that you have an ancestor, a great-great-great-grandparent that had the same love, that was renowned as a singer. And suddenly you realize that a part of them, someone that you never knew or even knew of, is being carried on within you. Well, these same traits were important for the early gospel hearers. Jesus says, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" He is not upset by the answers. He hears Elijah, John the Baptist, Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. These are good answers. These mean at least that the crowds are on the right track because they are placing Jesus in a long line of faithful servants of God, men who are willing to put their lives at stake for God's people. He then goes on to say, though, "But who do you say that I am?" Implicit in this question might be a few others. Why have you left your family, your job, everything you've known to come and follow me? Why have you given it up? Who do you say that I am? Several summers ago, my husband and I hosted a party in the courtyard of our building. My parents' godchild and someone I'm very close with, Annika, was there. Annika was a PhD student at the University of Chicago in Asian Studies, and she was with her new husband, Young. She had met Young while studying in China, and he had only been in the U.S. for about 3 months. He came up to me very excited and said, "I want to ask you some questions about your ministry." He said, "I don't know much about Christianity, but I have great admiration for Christians. In China, it is still dangerous to be a Christian. You still cannot worship freely. And Christians there are doing great humanitarian service at risk to themselves. I would like to follow Jesus," he said, "but I can't. I know that Jesus said you need to give up all your possessions and come and follow him, and I just can't do that. Part of the reason I came to the U.S. was to better myself, to get a good job and have a better standard of living, and to buy things. So I can't follow Jesus." I stood there speechless. I felt it was unbelievable that of all the stories of Jesus, the story of the rich young man was the one that he was most familiar with. I had been preparing myself to answer questions about the resurrection, miracles, the impossibility of the incarnation. And instead of theological mystery, I was confronted with this very earthly idea that to follow Jesus, we needed to give up all of our possessions. Were these words to the rich young man also words for me? And how could I not sound like a hypocrite as we stood on this beautiful night in our garden, knowing that the condo that my family lived in would be occupied by several generations of an extended family in the rural area that Young lived in? I couldn't believe that now I was actually really hoping for what I thought would be an easier theological question to answer. "Who do you say that I am?" Jesus asks his disciples. This is not a safe question. And following Jesus is not about being safe, even though we have made it that way. The answer is more than simple confession that Jesus is the Messiah. It is also about shaping a community molded in the light of Jesus' actions and his teachings. And so this question of identity is not just a matter of definition, but of discipleship. Not just a matter of doctrine, but a matter of formation. And so we can also ask ourselves, why did we come here this morning? There are a lot of other things we could be doing. We could be shopping. We could be going out to brunch. We could be sleeping in. If it was a bit warmer, we might be golfing. What has brought us here? Why have we come to follow Jesus? Jesus goes on to say to Peter, after Peter answers the question, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." The use of the word church here is important. This word is only used twice in the Gospels. Both times in the book of Matthew. This is the first, and then it's used again in chapter 18. After Peter has correctly identified who Jesus is, Jesus immediately gives him a job to do. "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." So understanding who Jesus is the first step. And the next step is doing the work of following Jesus. Images of Jesus matter. What image of Jesus is most challenging for you? If we take the gospel seriously, we will each be challenged to our core by some teaching or some aspect of Jesus' life or ministry. For young, it was financial and practical. How do we live as Christians in this world and make and use our finances in a way that's in line with our Christian faith? For some, the challenge will be theological. How do we, as rational people living in a technological age, believe in miracles? How do we believe in the resurrection? For some people, the biggest challenge for Jesus will be our call to love our enemies. How do we do that? How do we love those who have wronged us? How do we live as forgiving people? How do we forgive others and become reconciled to God and to each other? Jesus challenges each of us. So as we leave church today and in the week ahead, this question is not just for the disciples, because we are also Jesus' disciples. But this question is for us to answer. We don't need to be discouraged and think we're not up to the task. The Bible shows us throughout how flawed Jesus' disciples were. He handpicked these people, and throughout the Bible they don't understand. Time and time again, they don't quite get what Jesus is doing. Time and time again, they deny him, and they do not follow as they should. So, we, as the disciples, are up to the task. The answer to this question should change who we are willing to be and to become. So as we go out this day, who do you say that Jesus is? Amen.